Most people hear this rhyme as children and never question it again. Mary had a little lamb, a harmless song, a gentle story, a piece of childhood almost everyone remembers. But there's something strange about nursery rhymes. The more you look at them, the darker they become. Because hidden beneath these innocent words are symbols, forgotten histories, and meanings most people never notice. And this particular rhyme? It may be connected to something far deeper than a girl and her lamb. Some believe it reflects innocence being controlled. Others think it represents sacrifice. And there's one disturbing detail about this rhyme that makes its history even stranger. A detail most people have never heard before. So today, we're uncovering the unsettling origins, hidden symbolism, and disturbing theories behind one of the world's most famous nursery rhymes. And by the end of this video, you may never hear it the same way again. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. Almost everyone knows these words. For generations, children have repeated this rhyme in classrooms, playgrounds, and homes without ever thinking twice about it. It feels harmless, comforting, familiar. And maybe that's exactly why it survived for so long. Because the most powerful stories are often the ones people stop questioning. The rhyme first appeared in the 1800s and is commonly linked to writer Sarah Josepha Hale, a woman famous for shaping American literature and culture. But the story itself may be older than people realize. According to popular legend, the poem was inspired by a real girl named Mary Sawyer, whose pet lamb supposedly followed her to school one day. The image became iconic: a child, a lamb, and innocence untouched by the world. But there's something unsettling hidden beneath that image, because most people only know the first few lines. The original poem continues far beyond the version taught to children. And the deeper you read, the stranger the themes become: obedience, attachment, isolation, control. The lamb follows Mary everywhere without question, without resistance, almost as if its entire purpose is devotion. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Why do humans find blind loyalty so comforting? But the story becomes even stranger when technology enters the picture. In 1877, inventor Thomas Edison tested one of the first sound recording devices ever created, the phonograph. And the words he reportedly chose to record were not political speeches, not religious scripture, not scientific discoveries. It was this rhyme: Mary had a little lamb. Think about that for a moment. The first human voice captured by a machine was a nursery rhyme about innocence and obedience. Out of every possible sentence in existence, why this one? Was it random? Or did the rhyme already hold a strange power inside the cultural memory of society? Because sometimes the stories repeated to children the most are the stories adults unconsciously fear forgetting. According to the most famous version of the story, Mary was real. Her name was Mary Sawyer, a young girl living in Massachusetts during the early 1800s. The story claims she once rescued a weak newborn lamb and cared for it until it became deeply attached to her. And one day, the lamb followed her to school. The children laughed, the teacher was shocked, and supposedly, that strange little moment inspired the poem that would later spread across the world. At first, it sounds almost too perfect. A child, a loyal animal, a wholesome memory frozen in time. But the deeper historians looked into the story, the more uncertain things became. Some believe Mary Sawyer truly inspired the rhyme. Others think parts of the story were exaggerated over time to make the poem more marketable and sentimental. And that's where things start becoming interesting. Because like many nursery rhymes, the line between truth and myth slowly began to disappear. Details changed, memories evolved, and eventually the story became less about history and more about symbolism. That happens more often than people realize. Human beings have always transformed uncomfortable truths into stories, especially songs. because songs are easy to repeat, easy to remember, and sometimes easy to hide meanings inside. Throughout history, societies have used simple rhymes to pass down fears, warnings, trauma, and moral lessons without directly speaking about them. And once you notice that pattern, nursery rhymes begin to feel very different, because suddenly they stop sounding like harmless children's songs and start sounding like echoes from the past. Think about it. Why are so many nursery rhymes secretly disturbing? Why do stories made for children so often contain themes of fear, punishment, loss, and death? And more importantly, what were adults really trying to teach children through these songs? At the center of the rhyme is the lamb itself. And that matters more than most people realize, because throughout human history, the lamb has never been just an animal. It has always carried meaning. To ancient cultures, the lamb symbolized purity, gentleness, innocence untouched by violence or corruption. Its white fleece represented something clean, something fragile, something worth protecting. That's why lambs appear constantly in religion, mythology, and sacred art. In Christianity, the image of the Lamb of God became one of the most powerful symbols in history, representing innocence offered as sacrifice. And long before that, ancient civilizations used lambs in rituals and ceremonies tied to death, forgiveness, and devotion. Which changes the way this nursery rhyme feels entirely, because suddenly, the lamb is not just a pet. Across history, the lamb has represented innocence destined for sacrifice. And once you understand that symbolism, the rhyme begins to sound very different. Mary had a little lamb. The creature follows her everywhere, without fear, without hesitation, without resistance, completely obedient. And maybe that detail is more unsettling than it first appears, because blind innocence is powerful, but it's also vulnerable. So what is the rhyme really showing us? Could the lamb symbolize innocence blindly following humanity? Or something darker? Could it represent humanity leading innocence toward destruction while calling it love? That idea becomes even stranger when you realize how comforting people find the image. A loyal creature following its owner endlessly, never questioning, never leaving. Why does that feel comforting to us? Why do humans admire obedience so deeply? And why are children taught, from their earliest years, that loyalty without resistance is something pure? Maybe because innocence is easier to guide, easier to shape, easier to control. And perhaps that's the hidden tension inside the rhyme itself, not the story of a girl and her lamb, but the story of innocence following trustingly, without understanding where it's being led. And then, the story reaches its most important moment. It followed her to school one day, which was against the rule. At first, the line feels harmless, even playful, but symbolically, this is where everything changes, because the lamb is no longer wandering freely beside Mary. Now it enters the classroom. And the classroom represents something much larger than a building. It represents structure, authority, rules, conformity. In other words, civilization itself. The moment innocence steps into a system designed to shape behavior. Notice what happens next in the rhyme. It made the children laugh and play. The children are fascinated by the lamb, not afraid of it, not disturbed by it, because children naturally respond to innocence, to curiosity, to wonder. But then the atmosphere changes. The teacher removes the lamb, and that detail feels strangely symbolic, because the moment innocence enters the structured world of rules and authority, it becomes unacceptable. The lamb must leave. Why? Because systems value order more than wonder. And perhaps that's the hidden message buried inside the rhyme. That society slowly teaches children to separate themselves from innocence in order to function inside the system. The classroom becomes the place where imagination is controlled, Emotion is managed, behavior is corrected, and eventually, obedience replaces curiosity. That's why this moment in the poem feels darker the more you think about it. The lamb doesn't harm anyone. It simply doesn't belong there. Its presence disrupts structure. And maybe that mirrors real life more than we want to admit. Children begin life deeply connected to wonder. They ask impossible questions. They imagine freely. They trust naturally. But over time, systems teach them what is acceptable to believe, how to behave, what to ignore, what to suppress. So could the removal of the lamb symbolize the moment innocence is separated from childhood? The exact moment wonder becomes impractical. The moment imagination is replaced by conformity. And if that's true, at what age do people stop seeing the world with innocence? And who teaches them to lose it? After being forced out of the classroom, the lamb doesn't run away. It doesn't return home. It doesn't resist. Instead, it waits, patiently, silently, endlessly, still loyal to Mary, still following the same invisible bond. And that's where the rhyme begins to feel psychologically unsettling, because the relationship between Mary and the lamb no longer feels simple. It feels dependent. The lamb exists entirely around one person. Its purpose is attachment. Its identity is devotion. And humans instinctively see that as beautiful. Why? Because people are deeply drawn to unconditional loyalty. We admire it in pets, in friendships, in relationships, even in leaders and followers. The idea that something would stay beside us no matter what feels comforting. But loyalty can become dangerous when it removes independence, and that's the darker possibility hidden inside the rhyme. The lamb never questions, never leaves, never chooses its own path. Its entire existence revolves around following. That changes the emotional tone of the story completely, because now the lamb begins to symbolize something larger than innocence. It symbolizes surrender, a being so emotionally attached that it loses itself entirely. And if you think about it, human history is filled with the same pattern. People following authority without question. Children copying behavior they don't understand. Societies rewarding obedience over individuality. Again and again, devotion becomes control disguised as love. And maybe that's why the rhyme continues to feel strangely unsettling beneath its soft melody. Because deep down, everyone understands the danger of losing themselves inside attachment. The danger of becoming so loyal that they forget who they are without something to follow, which leads to a disturbing philosophical question hidden at the center of the poem. Is blind devotion beautiful or terrifying? The unsettling themes hidden inside Mary, Had a Little Lamb, are not unique. In fact, many nursery rhymes become darker the deeper you study them. Ring Around the Rosy, Rock-a-Bye Baby, London Bridge is Falling Down. For centuries, people have debated whether these songs contain hidden references to disease, death, disaster, political fear, or social control. And whether every theory is true or not, one thing remains undeniable. Nursery rhymes were never created in a vacuum. They were born from real societies, real anxieties, real human fears. Long before modern entertainment existed, stories and songs were how cultures preserved memory. Parents passed them to children. Children passed them to the next generation. And over time, the original meanings often became distorted or forgotten completely. But traces remained hidden inside the words. Some rhymes contained coded political satire, disguised as harmless verses. Others warned children about danger. Some reflected famine, disease, punishment, or instability. And many used fear to teach morality. Because before television, before psychology, before modern education, stories were how societies transferred fear. A simple rhyme could survive hundreds of years because melody makes memory powerful. That's what makes nursery rhymes so fascinating psychologically. The human brain remembers rhythm almost automatically, especially during childhood, which means a song can outlive the society that created it. Even trauma can survive through repetition, generation after generation. People continue speaking words whose original meanings may have already faded into history. And children repeat them long before they understand what they're saying. That idea alone is deeply unsettling, because it means cultures can unknowingly pass down fears, beliefs, and emotional conditioning for centuries through something as simple as a melody. And maybe that's why these rhymes continue haunting people, even as adults. Not because we consciously remember their meanings, but because some part of us recognizes the emotion hidden underneath them. So the next time you hear a nursery rhyme, ask yourself something carefully. How many songs do we inherit without ever questioning what they were truly trying to say? In 1877, inventor Thomas Edison introduced something the world had never seen before. A machine capable of capturing the human voice, the phonograph. For the first time in history, sound could survive after the speaker was gone. And according to historical accounts, the words Edison chose to test this invention were simple. Mary had a little lamb. At first, it seems random, almost trivial. But the more you think about it, the stranger it becomes. The first human words captured by a machine were not a speech, not a prayer, not a warning, but a nursery rhyme, a song associated with childhood, innocence, obedience, memory. And there's something deeply eerie about that, because the moment humanity learned how to preserve voices forever, the voice it chose to preserve was the voice of a child's rhyme, almost as if civilization was trying to immortalize innocence itself before the world changed forever. And the world was changing. Industrialization was accelerating. Machines were transforming daily life. Human beings were entering an era where technology would begin shaping how people think, work, communicate, and even raise children. So maybe it's symbolic. Human civilization preserving innocence, right before entering the age of machines. But there's also a darker interpretation. Maybe the recording represents something else entirely. The moment childhood stopped being purely human and became something reproducible, repeatable, mechanical. A lullaby transformed into data, emotion transformed into sound waves, memory transformed into technology. And somehow, that makes the rhyme feel even more haunting, because now the song no longer belongs only to people. It belongs to the machine too. So maybe Mary Had a Little Lamb truly was innocent. Maybe it was simply a story about a girl and her pet. But sometimes, the stories that survive the longest reveal something deeper about the people who keep repeating them. Because hidden inside this rhyme are themes humanity has struggled with for centuries: the loss of childhood, the sacrifice of innocence, blind loyalty, control disguised as guidance, and the slow conditioning that shapes people into obedience. The lamb follows without question. The classroom rejects wonder, and innocence is eventually separated from the world it trusted. Maybe that's why the rhyme still feels strangely haunting beneath its soft melody. Because deep down, everyone remembers what it felt like to lose a part of themselves while growing up. And perhaps that's the real darkness hidden inside nursery rhymes. Not monsters, not curses, not secret conspiracies, but the uncomfortable truth that childhood never lasts. So here's the final question. What if nursery rhymes were never meant to comfort children, but to prepare them for the world? The next time you hear a nursery rhyme, listen carefully, because behind the melody, behind the soft words and familiar rhythm, there may be something far older hiding underneath. A warning, a fear, a memory passed down through generations in the form of a simple song. And maybe that's why these rhymes never truly disappear, because the stories taught to children often reveal the deepest truths about the world adults live in. The songs we teach children shape the adults they become. If you enjoy uncovering the dark origins, hidden meanings, and unsettling history behind ancient rhymes, myths, and forgotten folklore, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, do you think Mary Had a Little Lamb is truly innocent, or does it hide something much deeper?